The war above all is officially starting in Marvel Comics. For those of you guys who don't know about that, we do have a playlist on the Storm series and the Thunder War, which leads directly into this. But the cool thing is that Muriwa, the guy writing the Storm comics, actually gives us a pretty awesome recap at the very beginning of this. And he says, when an ancient and vengeful thunder god swore to incinerate our planet, it was Aurora Monroe who met the god in mortal combat. When the heavens above South America churned in betrayal and wrath, it was Storm who whispered soothing echoes to quell the rage of Mother Earth. When a radioactive explosion ripped through a city in her paternal home country, Earth's mightiest mutant shielded the disenfranchised, saved the lives of the weak, and healed the brokenhearted. Like the rain she commands, she delivered both the just and the unjust alike in their desperate hour, standing shoulder to shoulder with renowned heroes in modern myths, the lasting legends, the Fantastic Four, the mighty Avengers, and the brave X-Men. Our storm god, Aurora Monroe. Now, what he's referring to here is basically the events of the Thunder War, right? And as a super quick explanation, again, the videos are there for you to check out. The idea behind Thunder War was that a guy by the name of Hadad had returned. He was a god who was powerful enough to destroy entire cosmic entities, and in fact, entire godly pantheons. And so that led to Storm going to war against him, and then of course, ultimately defeating Hadad, thus ending the Thunder War. But there was a holdover, which was Mistress Death. But before we get to that point, we actually end up picking up with Susanoo, I think is how you pronounce his name, but he's the Shinto god of storms, or a Shinto god of storms. Specifically, he's on Rage, the rogue planet, which is presented to us as essentially a cousin of Ego, the living planet. It's not overly significant. You see that happen sometimes in Marvel Comics. It's just a planet similar to Ego careening towards Earth. What matters is that when Storm shows up here, the two of them start addressing one another, right? And he says, Aurora, you have brought a fine weapon. And she says, I bring no weapons. And he says, I am a god. You will need a great weapon to slay me. And that's when Storm says, I am a great weapon, which just hits hard. That's an amazing response. Such a phenomenal line. And so that's where Storm is told, then forgive me, right? I have underestimated your abilities once again. The very folly that led me to bring great dishonor to my pantheon. My actions against you and the universe in the Thunder War have reached the ears of my eldest sister, and she has given me a route to redemption. And that's where Storm realizes ritual suicide. And he says, yes, right, I have chosen you to be my second, to take my head after I have cut into my belly. And so Storm is just kind of saddened by this, right? She says, I am honored that you've chosen me for this. And he says, but you have a complicated vow against taking life. And Storm says, yes. Now, here's an important thing to know here. When he talks about the idea of having gone to war against Storm, the whole idea behind his actions during the Thunder War is that he was a group of gods who actually wanted to test Storm and to see whether or not it was worth allying with Storm or allying with Hadad. Now, we will find out there was actually another motivation behind his decision, which is a lot more human than you would expect it to be for a god of storms. But ultimately, he and these other gods stood against Storm, and then Hadad attacked them anyway, right, which is really kind of weird. But that's why he says, that is why I have taken control of this rogue planet with my sword. This planet traverses space at my will. It will continue on a collision course with your homeworld unless you agree to help me take my life swiftly. And he says, I know you. If I am a threat to your people, and that's where Storm says, then I would end you. And so she says, very well, you have my utmost attention. I cannot say for certain, but I believe my past self would be seething at this moment. I would be furious that you would rather die than live to earn your honor back. I would also make you experience pain for threatening to hurt the innocent in your self-destructive quest. But today, I would like to make you some tea. And that's one of the coolest things about the Storm comic, right? The way Muriel writes this, it's almost kind of like a dive into godhood, and it's also a dive into philosophy. This will undoubtedly go down as one of the greatest Storm runs in the history of Marvel Comics. I firmly believe that. I mean, it already is, but it's going to go down that way, right? People are going to look back on it, and it's going to be incredible. And so at that point, you switch over to one of the coolest things, and I want you to pay very close attention to this because I think it's teasing a reboot at Marvel. So you have this television show that's going on, right? Space exploration, different things like that. But one of the people that are talking here, right, they say the theory is there was a terrible cosmic war that destroyed the old universe. This new 8th universe is only 10 years old, with the illusion of age, memories of ancient beings like the elders of the universe, our carbon dating equipment, fossil records. They are all wrong. They all feed off the lie. Everything you see here is a lie. If our entire existence is a deception, what does that say about us? What does that say about the nature? And then before they can finish, the TV goes on the fritz. Now, here's why I say it feels like this might be a tease for a reboot of Marvel. I'm not saying that it is, but I'm saying it feels like it. Keep in mind, when DC Comics launched the New 52, only 5 years had passed since superheroes first arrived on the scene. When they did DC Rebirth, they revealed that a huge portion of history in the DC landscape had been changed by Dr. Manhattan. That was undone, and then everybody regained all these memories they didn't know they have. Then you go into Dark Crisis, which basically wipes out the idea of the New 52 and just says all of the history in DC is intact. Now, Marvel doesn't have that problem. They've never done reboots before. They haven't reset their continuity in any meaningful way, but it's high time they did. So take this information, combine it with DC Rebirth, and make what you will of it. But the fact that they're going with a 10-year landscape, that's exactly what Rebirth did. So, I don't know. Just let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Just kind of my thought here. But of course, in the middle of all this guy and his girl are getting ready to touch naughty bits. But when the TV goes on the fritz, she stops him, right? She's like, the TV's glitching again. And he's like, so? Who cares about the TV? That's the least of his concerns, right? Guy's about to get some action, and she just says, I don't want your nosy neighbors to hear us. And he's like, oh my God, right? So at that point, he gets up, and then of course he ends up going to the bathroom, and she's like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to the John. And she's like, well, don't take your phone. You're in there for hours on end when you take it with you. And he just asked the question, like, how else am I going to call the insurance company for a TV replacement? Now, I don't know why you'd call the insurance company while you're sitting on the toilet, but different strokes for different folks. But it's really just kind of him venting, right? Because he says, who cares if the whole damn city hears us anyway? And if you care so much, maybe you can just keep your mouth shut when we do it. Right? It's not like I'm the one who screams like a birthing banshee. And he says, every day, I understand why your father left your mother. So clearly this guy has no respect for the woman in his life, and he absolutely does not like her. And he says, one of these days, I am going to lose my mind and give her the whole spiel, which really begs the question, why not just leave, my guy, if you really hate her that much? But in the midst of all of that, and of course, she sends him a text and says, hey, I'm going to make some popcorn. And then his phone just suddenly goes into incognito mode by itself. And he's like, what in the heck? Right? And his phone starts going on the fritz, just like the TV, right? And then it just says, charging not available. Liquid has been detected. And he just says, I am not even charging this stupid thing, right? And he just gets frustrated. He blows into it and it fixes the fritz, but liquid's still present. He blows again, and this black liquid comes out, fills his head, and blows it up. Now, here's something to understand here, right? If you do not remember the events of Storm, issue number 12, you will not remember what's going on here. In Storm issue number 12, right, at the very end of the Thunder War, there was an epilogue in that comic. The last page of the comic was Mistress Death, who Storm was getting ready to go to war against, seemingly the one leading the war above all. That Mistress Death had gathered together all kinds of different people, some of whom were basically zombies, and some of whom were not. One of the people that she had brought in was Gore the God Butcher, and that's what you're getting here, right? It's crazy. Like, it's kind of nuts. And so in that moment, right, like the phone just kind of starts talking, right? Help, help, help. I'm stuck in here. And so that's when you switch back to the television now that the girlfriend's dead or the wife or whoever. And it says, now, for the viewers at home, our next guest is massive, making their biggest appearance yet on the show is the mistress of chaos magic, the sorcerer supreme of our realm, the thorn in the flesh of the elder gods. Ladies and gentlemen, and all peoples, give a hefty round of applause for the Scarlet Witch, because lest we forget, at the end of Books of Doom, going into the new Marvel landscape for the magical side of everything, Scarlet Witch became the new sorcerer supreme, which I completely forgot about until I covered this comic, to be honest with you guys. But at that point, you switch back over to Storm and the conversation that she's having with Susanoo and kind of the aftermath of it, right? And that's where she's told, you will die if you go into battle with such a heavy heart. And she says, he trusted me Shigar, he trusted me and I betrayed that trust. But she's told, right, he ambushed you during the Thunder War, intended to end you. Now, to force you into an action that you would rather not take, he threatened to annihilate your people. You did what you had to do. And in this instance, she had fed him poison, or at least something that he perceived to be poison. And she simply says, no, it's not poison. It is tea, but it contains a muscle relaxant strong enough to put 10 Olympians to sleep, courtesy of Beta Ray Bill. And of course, he's pissed off, right? You have no honor. And that's where she says, no matter the words you hurl at me, I will not take your life. Rather, with the help of my fellow Avengers, I will imprison you in a pocket dimension until you are no longer a threat to my people or yourself. And he says, for robbing me of an honorable death, you have only cursed yourself, Aurora Monroe. You will soon know the wrath of Mistress Death. You will soon burn with the pain that fills my heart. And of course, that leads to him being sent to this pocket dimension, and that leads to Storm taking off on her dragon, which is dope. But that's one of the things to remember. Whenever it came to these various gods that Storm was fighting, she wasn't really killing them. She was just literally sending them off to a pocket dimension. That's all that was really happening here. And so that's when you switch over to France, right, with a mother and her 2 children. And she says, this is everything they tell you not to do as a parent. And she says, here, be careful with this. It's to protect you and your sister from bad people. But if you see a monster, hide and stay quiet. Pepper spray does not work on them. So this is clearly a reference to Attack on Titan. Obviously, this is a reference to Attack on Titan. At least I would love to believe that it is, right? But the daughter asks, right, why does he get to be in charge? And the mother says, because he is your big brother. That's why I have to leave too. I am in charge of this city because I am the strongest. I have contacted the Storm Sanctuary. They said the Weather Witch herself is coming to save us. Isn't that awesome? And so as Storm swims, she arrives in the city itself. And when she emerges from the water, right, she says, your prediction rang true, Earther. Submerged in the ocean, the monsters could not sense our approach. So talking to Shigor is dope. And so Storm just says, for the sake of the civilians down below, we use fire only as a last resort, so as not to alert our enemies of our arrival. If you must summon lightning, summon the escaping thunder. And he just says, I. And so at that point she says, now let us introduce our invaders to penance, retribution, and carnage. And she starts attacking everyone. And so at that point, you switch back over, right? I've informed the Storm Sanctuary that as the resident hero of this city, I will aid with the civilian evacuation while Storm destroys all the monsters. And so suddenly, right, there's a clash, weapons flying everywhere, and she just says, hide quickly. And so it's only a momentary thing, right? There's not actually anybody showing up here. But she says, sorry about that, kids, right? I must be a little nervous because I'm meeting the famous Storm for the first time today. But then suddenly, just like a gigantic hand comes smashing into this thing, and the girl is grabbed and yanked away. And that's where the brother says, stop, right? Mama will be fine. She is the death siren. She's the best superhero in the entire world. No one can hurt her, and she will come back to us in no time at all. And so Storm looks over, right? And it says, the invading Ibora feed a magma core of about 1200 degrees Celsius, while the humans live at a delicate warmth of about 37 degrees Celsius. This small, seemingly random detail has spelled doom for the Raiders as the mistress of the elements lives up to her title. And Storm just kind of thinks, right? Only the coastal areas of the city appear to be under attack, right? Frothing salt water from the sea creeps into the nooks of the vast city, passing over every warm life form and demolishing all creatures with blazing magma hearts. As lava collides with seawater, Storm traps the heat, volcanic glass, and toxic gases in swirling tunnel walls. The monsters who develop the instinct to take to the skies quickly find themselves contending with a dragon storm god. The prayers of the worshippers that have brought me here have suddenly vanished, Aurora. Has the enemy been defeated? That's what he says, and that's important because Storm says no, right? And she says, there you are. And she immediately starts going after this one person who appears here, right? And that's where this person says, you are here. good. And Storm says, forgive me if I do not exchange pleasantries, but I am putting an end to your invasion here and now. No one threatens the lives of my people. And that's where she says, I am Akujin, war general of he who you deemed so fit to imprison. You would not have seen me coming if this were an invasion. This is a warning. Free my lord from your imprisonment. If not, we will destroy a city on your planet every 5 days. No continent will be spared. And she says, a word of advice, O self-proclaimed goddess. You should learn how to see through illusion magic, because when the illusion is removed, Storm killed everyone. It's like Old Man Logan. That's what it looks like. It looks like Old Man Logan. When Mysterio tricked Wolverine into killing the X-Men, Storm was tricked into attacking the city. Right? That's why the dragon said, the prayers of the people who called me here are gone. I cannot hear them. Right? And that's when it stated, only the city's coasts were spared from my wrath. Right? Because Storm was tricked into killing all these innocent folks. And so in that moment, you jump back to a combination of two different scenes happening at the same time. Storm taking a shower and dealing with this, right? Coming to terms with her actions and the conversation that she initially had with Susanoo, right? And he says, I know now that you are not a god in the same way that I am, so pardon my asking, but are you immortal? And Storm says, I do not believe that I am. And so he asks, how long have you lived? And she says, compared to you, not very long. And she says, most humans would call me young, and our lives are but drops in a god's ocean. And so that's where he says, I have lived for many millennia. I have seen the empires that I have nurtured in their infancy grow to reach for the stars, yet crumble to ash soon after. I have seen mighty men felled by even mightier ones. When you are immortal, nothing is precious in the way that you want it to be, not even me. Everyone, everything around you eventually gives in to death. And he says, that is why I chose to fight against you in the Thunder War. I wanted the destruction of this universe so we may build a new one without suffering and pain. But if the universe will remain unchanged, if it will cling tightly to its cruel ways, then I will leave it instead. I will accept my sister's sentence with open arms. Maybe then I can finally know rest in peace. I can finally be free of the anguish of the innocent. And that's when you switch over, right? And this woman says, Storm, I was so nervous to meet you, right? And she dies. She succumbs to her wounds. And so Storm, right, bending down and talking to these kids, right, she says, your mother fought bravely, and I am sorry. And the son says, I told my sister our mother was going to be all right, that she was going to come back to us, even though I knew that mom was never going to come back. So no, you are not sorry. You're just telling us the lie that you think we want to hear. And that's okay, because everyone lies, even Storm. And that's where Storm just says, I failed, right? I have no honor. And she thinks back to the statement that was made to her when she cast Susanoo into that pocket dimension. And he says, you will soon burn with the pain that fills my heart. And Storm lashes out. She shows such an incredible level of anger and frustration here, because then you switch back over to that moment when they're having tea. And he says, a beautiful tea ceremony, Aurora. And she says, life can still hold many unfathomable beauties, even for one as ancient as you. The hopeful possibilities only fade away to death. And so she tricked him. She's shown great dishonor here, right? She's shown great dishonor by tricking someone in what was supposed to be an honorable ceremony and denying his wish. That is a massive betrayal of herself and of him. If you look at it from a cultural perspective, it's huge. It's massive. And then to compile onto this, she effectively destroyed a whole city. And so while Storm is resting in her sanctuary, that's when Wanda shows up and just says, Storm, right? What wrath have you brought down upon us all? With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.